Welcome back, Equity Warriors. Thanks for tuning in to this special episode. I have a guest today. His name is Louis T. McLean II. He is the meditative coach and founder and CEO of Melanin Origins, a global publishing company that specializes in children's books about lesser-known African-American pioneers and focuses on rebuilding a connection to our cultural and spiritual past. As the meditative coach, Louis' mission is to help clients identify and attain results in their passion and purpose so that they may manifest the life they have always desired. He is a proud father of two beautiful children named Serenity and Noah. I love that name, Serenity. And he's intrigued by the resilience and tenacity of historical leaders who stand for truth, justice, and overcoming any obstacles placed in their way. He has authored 7 books on topics ranging from Black history, the fruits of the spirit, and his very own mindset philosophy entitled Little. And I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Louis, my friend, welcome to the show. I'm glad we have finally been able to make this happen.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited for this conversation, Dr. Berry.
I am too. So, it's been a few years since we met, and as I believe you were just getting started on that journey, the journey you had in developing Melanin Origins into an amazing children's book company. Your stories are beautifully illustrated. I love the first one that I ever saw. My grandson stole it, by the way. That was years ago. But these stories that are significant and they're consequential, featuring Black protagonists and historical features. So I want you to tell us, the listeners, a little bit about how you came up with the concept and the content, the things you've chosen to focus on.
Okay, thank you. And yes, it has been about 7 years since we started the company. We started in 2016, and as soon as we got started, that's when you and I were introduced through Mr. Jacinto Ramos through Fort Worth ISD. So I'm glad that we were able to meet. But yes, we launched the company in 2016. Our very first book, Brick by Brick, a snippet of the life of Booker T. Washington. That's the very first book out of 25 books in our catalog. But we started with an idea just to tell our stories, right? We saw the need. We saw that children were not even me in my personal life, I did not learn about Booker T. Washington. I did not know who he was till I was over 25 years of age. I did not know who Marcus Garvey was. I did not know. The most that I knew was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. And that was the narrative, pitting them against each other and so on and so forth. And I realized that in the public school system, our children, they're brought up with, and you can look at it as an inferiority complex, because whenever Black history is taught, then the first time that our children are learning about our historical leaders or anything great about our past, it's being introduced as we started out as slaves. And then somewhere down the road, we had to fight in the civil rights movement. And so there's always been this huge struggle-based notion when it comes to Black history, learning about anything Black. And so I saw that void in our system, and I thought, you know what? I can create children's books and tell stories about accomplishment, about achievement, about social justice, about leadership, about truth and equity. And I can give these stories to children, and they can see people who look like them, who actually did exist, whether 50 or 100 years ago, who did live their lives aspiring to be great and accomplish many things, who, of course, in today's system, for the most part, they're not getting those messages.
Yeah. It saddens me every time I think about when we look at how history is taught, especially in our public school systems here in the U.S., that Black history starts with slavery. But when we look at history around the globe, and I taught world history for a period of time, is that when we look at the other civilizations, all the ancient civilizations always exclude all of the African nations and empires that existed well before any Western European ones did. So that's just a personal pet peeve. So I want to thank you for at least elevating the story so that our children can hear that. And I know that we have more and more people that are entering the space that can go back to those, 12th, 13th, 14th century empires of Africa and start to tell our children really the greatness of what was built that has been ignored over the millennium.
Yes, you're welcome.
So
it's imperative.
It is. It is. You know, there's some controversy over what motivates our Black boys in particular to read. And some people will say it's skills, some say it's access to books, some say it's finding books that are of interest, and whether or not those books are Black oriented or not. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. What do you think, especially with your books, would motivate Black boys to read them?
Okay. So our books specifically, of course, are for pre-birth up until second grade. So pre-birth as in the parents can start reading a book to the baby that's still in the womb, right? And then the baby's born, they start reading and introducing our leaders to children and building their vocabulary and so on and so forth. But what would interest them, it is a good mix of all of what you said. And that's what we do focus with in Melanin Origins. We want to make our stories relatable. So just speaking of Black history in general, the way how when we did our research, we saw that first off, a book cover would be straight, just struggle based. So there's someone on the cover picking cotton. There's someone with the frowned up face who's going through the struggles. That's the first thing. Or there'll be a book where on one page there's a black and white picture, and then there's a short narrative, whether 2 sentences, 1 paragraph. And then you turn the page, and then there's someone else, a black and white picture, short narrative too. And so it's not fun. It's not appealing. It feels like I'm just in school doing a task. And so, like you said, the fun, the bright illustrations, the intriguing storyline, letting kids know that they have the abilities within themselves. So what can boost them to read is engaging them first in a way that's culturally responsive. So they're able to see themselves in the literature, but then also making it relatable and fun to actually learn. And so they're learning capabilities about themselves. But then I will say this, just from my own personal experience. Okay. Because growing up, as a child, I did not grow up just reading books again and again and again and over. Actually, it wasn't until I graduated college. No, I was still in college. I was about 20 or 21 years old, and I was on a flight. And it wasn't until I was on a flight and I read the back of this book, which was a fictional book. And the woman actually ended up giving me the book. What I'm trying to say is that I was 21 years old when I read my first chapter book on purpose, is what I'm trying to say.
Wow.
Okay. And it just so happened that I like to watch movies like Paid in Full or New Jack City or Boys in the Hood. Growing up, I watched those kind of movies all the time. And this fictional book was a book with that kind of a storyline. And I had never read a book on purpose just before outside of school. Right. So now I'm reading this book and I'm captivated. Mm. I found out that my imagination worked way better through reading the book than it did actually watching the movie or watching the TV series, and that started my journey. So I was introduced to a book that I with subject matter that I was actually interested in as well. And so parents definitely have to get a good feel for what their child is interested in, and then expose them to different genres, because you never know what could spark a child's imagination or desire to start learning.
Yeah. You talked about the movies that you like to watch. And so I wonder, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Is it because those are the only places where you saw images of men who looked like you?
Yes. I was thinking about this just literally yesterday. And from time to time, that's literally it. When I think about my life growing up and coming up, what did I see? I saw the rappers. I saw, what they put on TV in the media, the kind of lifestyle that was portrayed. And that was the dominant theme that I seen. And unfortunate for most of our children out here, I started to believe that that's the way how life must be. That's the way that I must conform to or succumb to and live my life that kind of a way. But yes, definitely, it's that is what was fed to me back then, and it still is going on today.
Yeah, it's interesting when I think about being a history teacher and especially teaching high school kids in U.S. history, and we look at how propaganda has played a role. And we always look at propaganda in terms of when we're in the classroom and teaching children about propaganda. We look at propaganda campaigns like that the Nazis used, right? We look at these other so-called evil empires and countries, and yet here in the US, we have the same types of propaganda that have pigeonholed people of color into being certain types of people, right? If we go back, with Black folks, the first Black actresses anyone ever saw were always in the mammy role, and the males were always sort of the step and fetch it role, right? So we never saw positive images of strength. I remember as a child, like my favorite actor was Sidney Poitier. I probably had a little 6-year-old girl crush on him, but to me, he was just, okay. And I even had a 40-year-old woman crush on him. I mean, he was strong and forceful, and his posture, everything about him said to me, this is what our men should look like. And, as a 6-year-old, I didn't understand that part of it. I just thought he was amazing. And Diane Carroll as a young girl, right? So those were the ones that I saw. And I remember even my mother forbid us. We were not allowed to watch Sanford and Son, and even the Jeffersons and Good Times. And I would go over to my friend's house or another relative's house and watch it over there. But my mother, and not understanding as a child, but she did not want us to see negative stereotypes of Black people. And so, I think as a community, and it's not just us, we look at how Indigenous Americans were portrayed in earlier movies, and their absence very often in current narratives about regular life in this country. They're not portrayed. Asian Americans, the same way. So we have our Latino people. Everyone's been pigeonholed into gangster or subservience or drunkenness, and our stories are not elevated in the popular media. Now, that is starting to shift just a little bit, but it's small in terms of when you look at how many of us there are, right? And the number of movies that come out where we are not properly represented. Anyhow, like I said, I can go down a rabbit hole. We can be way off.
No, those are very great points. And that's the whole thought process behind me branding myself as the meditative coach, because I was thankful, thank God, I was able to produce Melanin Origins for the children. And I worked in the juvenile justice system for over 7 years. That's where I met Jacinto, but I worked there for over 7 years. And it is tough to undo the conditioning, to undo the brainwashing, to undo all the propaganda that's been, given to us. When you see these children who come in and they're troubled youth, it is tough to undo that. So as a meditative coach, that is a part of my goal, to help restore individuals to the truth of who they are. We are able to program ourselves, first off, through what we hear and through what we see. And so, the powers that be, they know that. That's why the media is the way how the media is. However, so often we tend to think that because I'm from this neighborhood and because we carried ourselves like this for this long of a time, this amount of time, this is what everyone does around me. I guess this is who I am, how I conduct myself, how things are. Meanwhile, we are the essence of the spirit that God has given us, and we're able to do so many great things. So when you talk about Sidney Poitier and back then, how that was the dominant theme that we could see, right? So we can look at what happened in the 60s, what happened in the 70s, our families were together, and we've been on such a decline ever since the propaganda became more heavy. So yeah, great point.
I had a guest on a few episodes before you. Her name is Florence. She's an educator in California. I want you to watch her podcast when it comes out, my podcast with her when it comes out, because I'm thinking it would be lovely to have the two of you on the show, because she works with justice-informed youth in the public school system, and you're seeing them in a detention facility. So I think you're seeing two sides of that same coin. I just think it would be an interesting conversation. And of course, we'll have to get Cinto on as well. Changing gears just a little bit. This is a random thought that comes into my head. Black history, because a lot of what your books are about are the history of Black folks here in America. And I always say that Black history is American history. And it annoys me that we have 1 month only. I understand how it started, but also that in this country, and other countries do have a Black Awareness Month, I'll call it that because it goes by different names. But in other countries, they tend to focus on Black culture and Black history, from the beginning, but understanding more of not just what was in the past, but what's happening presently, and the contributions. And all the other months, or almost all the other months, with the exception of women's history, are cultural or awareness months when we talk about different populations. So your thoughts on Black History Month? Should it be a month? Should it be more inclusive? Should it be something other than history? Just some thoughts on that.
It definitely should be more than a month. It should be weaved into the current curriculum that exists year round. Okay, it should be weaved into it year round. Because why is it that we're only learning about? Okay, of course, we need to learn about American history. We need to learn about, our state's history. Then we go into European history, right? And then we dive into Greece and Rome, and we have all these tales and all these myths, and we have all this. However, we're not appreciating the vast cultures that exist, outside of Europe. We're not appreciating that. Also, as you said, Black history is American history. We helped not only to build this country, but we were coming in and out of this country way before Christopher Columbus was here or decided to come and, send their conquistadors, right? So it definitely should be embedded in the curriculum year round. And here's the thing, right now they're banning books. So what I'm saying,
that's where we were going next. So go ahead, keep it rolling. Book bans was next on my list.
I'm saying that books are actually being banned, but then we turn around and then we might want to talk about Will Smith for Black History Month. I think that, yes, we need to talk about cultural things. We need to talk about topics of today, but let's not talk about Chris Rock and Will Smith, right?
Right.
Let's not talk about that while we are minimizing Booker T. Washington, Marcus Garvey, Ida B. Wells, what they really stood for and their true messages. That's the concept behind Melanin Origins, because, okay, I did not know who Ida B. Wells was, again, until I was over 25 years old. Okay. Then I come to find out that she has schools named after her. She's world renowned. Okay. Why was she such a strong and powerful woman? Why is she known? She went on anti-lynching campaigns, besides being the first Black African-American editor who's a woman, right? And, traveling abroad and the many accomplishments that she did. Her main thing was she went on anti-lynching campaigns. Speaking the truth, she became well known and renowned for doing that, standing up and championing the cause for true equity and for people to be true to life. And so why would we minimize that conversation for children that are of the appropriate age to receive that conversation? Is it truth or is it not truth? Did it play a role in shaping America? Yes, she helped found the NAACP. Okay, so and many other things brought Black people into journalism on a more prevalent level, many other things, right? So why would we minimize that and then only talk about Chris Rock or Will Smith or something like that? So
because
I think that
what they want to talk about plays into their narrative that we are subordinate, that we are inferior, right? I just say it like it is. I just recorded an episode, I don't know, last week. When did books become more of a threat than bullets? And it at the time, I think I did it a day or two after the school shooting in Denver. And then, of course, since then, how many more have there been? 3 in Texas the following week? in Houston yesterday. Now, it wasn't in school, but a shooting right outside of a school here in Houston. So there's all this focus on banning books that have content that show Black people, that show other people of color, that show LGBTQ people. So we want to get those out of our schools because they're dangerous, but not do a doggone thing about the guns in our schools. And, here you are, you're seeing both sides of that, right? Because of your work with publishing as well as your work in the justice system. I'm certain that your books are being banned in some places just because of, So how is that impacting you? What are your thoughts about, that being ostracized or banned?
Yes. So my first thought about that is just I'm going to come from two different angles on this. The first thought is that first, we as people of color, African American, we need to recognize that group economics and cooperative economics is the way that we should be living our lives and conducting ourselves in general. Is how we build our economic power, move to political power, and so on, so forth. So homeschooling is always a great option when you have the mindset of a home, that you're going to homeschool your child. Then you're saying that I am taking control of the education that my child gets, and I'm ensuring that all these boxes get checked off. That's the way how we have to think about Black history, regardless if they decide that that's what they're going to teach in schools or not. That's the way we have to look at it. Parents are our child's first teacher, and then we need to be able to let our children know about our leaders. That's the tool that we provided through Melanin Origins. That's my first angle when it comes to that. But then secondly, I think it's incredibly, it's mind wrecking. I mean, it blows my mind to think that people are afraid of the truth and what the truth, the results that the truth will produce. And they're so afraid, and they claim to love God and believe in God so much. However, they cannot rely on God and the truth. Those that will worship God will worship him in spirit and in truth. It's mind blowing.
They're forgetting about the truth part. Yeah, they're just leaving that part of it out, right? And I don't know about you, but I remember my entire life, we've heard that the truth shall set you free.
Set us free,
right? Mm-hmm. They don't want to go there. You said something about, you've talked about homeschooling and really taking control of what it is that our children learn. Growing up in California, I had friends who always had to go to the other school after school, right? My Japanese friends had to go to Japanese school. My Chinese friends had to go to Chinese school. My Jewish friends had to go to Hebrew school. Everybody went to school after school to focus on their culture because that was not taught in our public schools. But Black folks have not built our community cultural schools. What do we need to do? How do we get these things started? What's a message that we can send out there to people who would even think, who are the people that we would get to start opening Black cultural schools?
That's a great question. And that's a question that aspire to be at the forefront of that conversation, of the forefront of building what that looks like for our community. Because if I bring it back to Melanin Origins, we have our first series, Black History. Okay, American Black History.
You've got the content.
The content, okay. American Black History. Our second series, faith-based. We see Black Bible characters who look like us. Our third one is specifically on values and virtues from our ancestral past. So we've segmented the Black community at least in a general 3 categories. Now, the Black community is segmented in so many other categories. I mean, I could say probably dozens, right? Segmented. So it is tough for us to say, oh, we're all going to agree on this one thing. Oh, we're all going to unify behind this one thing. But it shouldn't be that tough whenever we see the results of, police brutality, when we receive the results of books getting banned, we look on TV, we keep seeing ourselves in a derogatory light. Like, it should not be. So what can we do? Like, we have to literally decide. And the best among us must form a coalition that's not capitalist based. Well, I don't want to say not capitalist based. It's not just based on gaining $1 is what I'm saying, but it's truly based on provide. So many of us are making money as a software engineer in the IT field. I mean, there's AI that can bring us together, right? There are food banks that can make sure that the least of us have what they need. People within our community are gaining in wealth and affluence. We have to create jobs for our own people. So it's a true collaborative effort but we must decide, like those of us who are able to, we have to decide that we got to come together and just make it happen.
Okay. Well, one of the things, just a side note, your contact information is going to be down in the show notes. So I just want to sort of call out to any listeners who might be thinking about that. Let's connect. If you've got a community learning center going on that's teaching cultural awareness for Black children or brown children because they're left out as well, let me know. Connect with me, connect with Louie. Let's see if we can't figure out a way to grow that across communities.
Yes. And in our faith-based series, you know that the Old Testament is general. We took some favorite characters from the Old Testament, aligned their lives with the fruits of the Spirit. That's like universal truths like joy, peace, right? Goodness. Like, who can disagree with that? If we had a cultural center that was teaching that, regardless of what specific denomination you belong to, that was generally teaching our kids, gearing them in that way. Our third series, Values and Virtues from Our Ancestral Past, we found that among all the different beliefs from Pan-Africanism and from ancient Egyptian and the Moors, over the general beliefs, most of us believe in the greatness, right, from Africa, from Egypt. We believe in that our people were doing those things and we had those civilizations. Well, there were codes of morality that they lived by. If we could introduce that subject matter into our schools, well, then there we go. What's that? Truth, justice, reciprocity, right?
Yes.
Again, universal things that we all would generally agree with. So it can be done. We just have to agree that we're able to do it.
I agree, and we need to do it. What you're saying is so true, because as more and more scholars dig into the origins of things, which was perfect, melanin origins, all of the origins of those ideas, those thoughts, those fairy tales, those fables, those, the proverbs, all of those things go back to various civilizations from Africa. There's just so much there. I want to go to something I read in your Bible, little. Tell me about that.
Oh, yes. Okay. So little is a mindset philosophy. That is the mindset philosophy of the meditative coach. So I said, if I'm going to help people, right, identify and attain results in their passion and purpose, right, if I'm going to help them, well, then I'm going to, have my set of, I have my structure, step-by-step structure. And if I'm going to tell you to do something, I need to be able to back that up with why I'm telling you to do that. And so little is the mindset philosophy behind the meditative coach, right? It combines psychology and universal principles, and it's an acronym. And thank you, because you did say it right. It's little. All right. It's an acronym for living the tree of life. Now, again, just about what we're talking about right now. Right. Going back to our ancestral past, right? Our ancestors back then in those civilizations believed that God existed in every single thing. And of course, within us. And the tree of life that we are familiar with, they believe that since God existed in everything and in us, that the tree of life was in us and it had certain faculties, right? Certain faculties. So one of them is that our divine, the default nature of our being is a peaceful nature, right? A nature that is free from emotional duress, from stress, from anxiety, right? The second one is the second tenet, the second tenet of little, right, is unwavering belief in oneness. So yes, all things do work together for good, and we have to frame our minds to see it that way. And we must have unwavering belief to see it that way, or else we might find ourselves, now we start to get disturbed within. So there's 10 tenets in little, living the tree of life, and it's the mindset philosophy behind my coaching service.
I love it. And is this something that you, when working with youth in the justice system, that you also sort of steer them along that path?
Well, thankfully, my as my life has, developed over the years, I've been working the juvenile system for 10 years now. However, I still volunteer and do different things of that nature. So back then, mainly juvenile, then the Melanin Origins journey. I actually am a trainer at American Airlines now. But Little is something that was just created last year. And my goal now is to go into schools, to public speak at schools, host workshops at schools, at juvenile camps, at summer camps, at mentorship camps, to help kids to open their minds up. We're taught so much about our emotions. The fourth tenet of Little is our superpowers, and our superpowers is our emotions. That's how our character, our personality is portrayed to others, our character. When we carry ourselves and speak through, and we utilize our emotions in the right way, we have the ability to fall in love, make someone fall in us. We can sway a crowd, right? For good or for bad. And people in our community, I would say people in our community, but let's say the children who struggle in our community, there's a major issue with anger management.
Oh,
Meanwhile, the major notion is, you're being emotional. Don't be emotional. No, we need to learn how to be emotionally intelligent, because anger is an emotion. So we need to be able to use intelligence with that. So it's tapping into all of those areas and helping to steer our people who are struggling, steer them in the right direction.
All right. Love it. I always sign off my podcast with a paraphrase of the great Angela Davis. As a child, I liked her for her fro. As an adult, I understood the intellect and all of the work that woman did. And you can't be prosecuted or persecuted, not prosecuted. When you're persecuted as a Black woman, it means that you're doing some good stuff.
Yes.
So Dr. Davis said, I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept. So I want to ask you, what is one thing that you cannot accept? And what can the folks who are listening to us today do to support that change in their own communities?
Okay, thank you. One thing that I cannot accept is to stand here and do nothing while they are continuing to ban books all across America. Okay, it is imperative for children to be able to visualize themselves living and thriving with equity, and learn Melanin Origins learning materials. It helps to accomplish that worthy aim. Okay, here's 3 things that some listeners can do, all right, to combat this. First, read with your child or encourage your child to read for at least 20 minutes a day. Reading helps to build a child's vocabulary and stimulates their imagination. Okay, books are friends and can teach empathy and provide a thorough understanding of the world around them. 2, please shop the Melanin Origins catalog at www.melaninorigins.com. Our books provide culturally responsive teaching, allowing kids to see themselves in books for academic purposes, or while connecting with their faith, or while seeking to rebuild that bridge of strong values and virtues from our ancestral past. And 3, bring the meditative coach to your school or youth event. My empowerment workshops help children to discover their purpose and blueprint for achieving short-term and long-term goals, propelling them into their destiny. So we can't sit here and be stagnant. It's our duty to teach our children. It's our duty when we see someone struggling, right, to make up that gap and to help that person get to the next place. And we have the ability. I believe that we have the power to create our reality. God never leaves himself without a witness, and we just need to identify how we can be a part of the change.
All right. So I'm hearing parents, librarians, whoever's purchasing books for your schools, classroom teachers, if you're building your own classroom libraries, community centers, barbershops, anybody can have these books on hand for these young children. We're going to make sure that Louie's information is down in the contact information so you can get right to the catalog and do your own shopping. And as he said, if you're looking for a speaker, not that you should overlook me, I do that too, but we're doing 2 different things. So take Louie up on that offer too. Just a reminder, folks, if you're hearing this for the first time on an audio podcast like iTunes or Spotify, just keep in mind that these episodes are being published first on my YouTube channel. So if you're not subscribed to that YouTube channel, look down in the show notes for that link. I am at Almitra Berry there. Subscribe, turn on notifications so that you'll know when we post something new. My guest today has been Louis McClain, CEO of Melanin Origins Books. Check them out at melaninorigins.com. Again, that detail will be down in the show notes. Louis, thank you for joining me. I know we had trouble getting connected, but it has truly been a pleasure.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right. Don't go away. To you equity warriors out there, if you or someone you know is an everyday equity warrior doing amazing things, let me know. We have more guests coming up, and I always say maybe it's you or maybe someone you know. That should be one of them. Continue to join me every week. And as always, don't worry about things you cannot change. Let's get to work changing the things we can no longer accept. And I'll see you next time.